You can see the size of the pieces of butter I've already cut. One thing we talked about briefly when it came to the difference between flaky and mealy crust is the size of the butter. The butter particle size has a big difference, makes a big difference in the style of flakes that it makes and also how far apart they are in the crust itself. So I'm going to start off with walnut-sized pieces. I call these walnut-sized. And basically they're just large pieces of butter. If you wanted mealy, you could cut up these pieces into much smaller pieces and you would get something that gives you a much more mealy result, which basically means smaller little shingles of butter. If you look at a shingle roof, you know what I'm talking about. Shingles overlap each other, and that's what keeps the roof of your house from leaking. If you overlap those shingles enough, your house is really waterproof. If you don't overlap them very well, you'll have leaks. Right? So, good analogy, right? It works. It's the way it is in life when it comes to shingles. But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create shingles with these pieces of butter. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go ahead and do it right on the table. So, this is Grandma's way of doing it. Question?
Could we freeze the butter?
You could.
Freeze it?
You don't want it so rock hard. I mean, you want it cold, but you don't want it so you can't roll it out.
Okay.
We have to be able to actually make shingles out of it, so it has to be able to be rollable. But if it's fresh out of the fridge,
It'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my butter right in with my flour, and this is the old way. This is called the well method, and the well method works really well. Just Grandma's way of doing it. We're going to kind of coat all of our butter in flour. You guys are thinking, oh God, we got to clean all this up. Right? Well, it will come together. Then we're going to take our rolling pin and we're going to roll this.
That's a nice rolling pin.
And what you'll notice is the butter shingling. It's coming off in these large pieces, these large flat pieces as you roll it out. Now we don't want to have this go all over the floor, but as I roll this, these flat pieces, these large chunks of butter are becoming large shingles, and you can imagine what they're going to become as they go in the dough. They're going to start to create layers. Now, of course, if you roll this out enough, you'll create smaller and smaller shingles. Your plastic scraper will be real handy for you because you can bend it and just clean off your rolling pin. If your butter gets too soft, if it starts getting really soft on you, you always have a recourse. You can always put it right back in the fridge and come back to it in a little while when it's cooled down a little bit. On warm days in the summertime, when I'm trying to make a pie, I run into this problem all the time when my butter gets too soft. I want to keep that butter hard, so in order to do that, I may have to keep going back to the refrigerator. Now I'm going to keep.
Freeze the dough after you made it, or like refrigerate it?
We are going to refrigerate it, yeah, because we want that butter to stay hard. And after we've made the dough, you're going to find that the butter is starting to get soft already, so we have to go back and re-refrigerate it.
How long does it last in the fridge or freezer or whatever?
Oh, in the freezer it will last quite a bit longer than on the fridge. If I were to make the dough and then put it in the fridge, it'd probably be good for about 3 days or so. And then you'd start noticing it starts to turn gray. And when it turns gray, what that basically means is you're starting to see the flour breaking down because there's been water in contact with it. So basically, we got all of our butter rolled out into flat pieces amid all the flour. And the idea here is simply to create those flat pieces that will then overlap and create a really nice flaky dough. Now this is for flaky. Again, if we wanted to mealy, all we have to do is make those particles smaller, make the shingles smaller. But you can see how big some of those pieces are. Nice big pieces, and they're going to create nice big air pockets. Big air pockets make really nice flakes. So my salt is already in here. I mixed that with the flour before I started. And this is why we call it the well method. I create a well in the middle, and I pour my water in there. 8 ounces of water. Now, this is where it gets fun and interesting. Start taking little bits of your dry material and bring it up over into the well, and eventually the well will soak up all the flour. And then you'll get a leak.
Not good.
Is it better to use ice water? Like without the ice in the dough, of course.
Good cold water. Yeah, keep your butter from softening. Like any recipe for pie dough, they're going to always tell you ice cold water as much as possible. And what I'm doing here is I'm just very gently tossing it together. After all, flaky dough will be all that much more flaky if we don't handle it very much. So you notice that I'm intentionally trying to handle this as little as possible. All I'm trying to do is bring it together as a dough. And the less I work it, the less gluten we'll have, and of course the flakier the result. At first it seems rather crumbly, but there is a sort of wet center in there, and that's what we're trying to get all the flour to gather onto and help form as a binder so it will hold all that fat in place. Now we're going to give this a chance to become better dough by relaxing for a while, just like we did with bench rest when we worked with bread. We allow it to rest for a little bit, and what that does is it starts to allow the water to gently spread to all parts of the dough. What's happening really is the earth is working in your favor here, because as you're working, if you think of it this way, your dough, let's say we have this nice big piece of dough, and in there we get all these nice flat shingles, all packed in there. As the water is trying to work its way down toward the center of the earth, right? Its gravity is pulling it down. Every time it goes down, it smacks into a piece of fat. Well, fat's waterproof. So the water can't go straight down. Instead, it goes down and it pushes off to the side because fat gets in the way. And every place it does that, it moves to the side this way, to the side that way. In other words, as you rest your dough, the water is dispersing horizontally as well as vertically, because the fat is causing that water to stop and move sideways. It's always, water always tries to find the easiest path to the center of the earth, right? It's always trying to find its way down. Gravity's always pulling it. So if you think of it that way, your fat is going to be working for you in this case, and all that water will start to disperse. In this lump right here, as it relaxes, the water will disperse more evenly, and you'll find that the dough will be much nicer to work with after it's rested. So, without handling it too much, I'm just kind of bringing it together as a ball of dough, making sure all my ingredients are in there. And it's all pretty much holding together here. I'm going to take a piece of parchment, and I'm just going to go ahead and put this in some parchment and flatten it down a little bit so it can rest in the refrigerator. Now this is a step that my mother never did, my grandmother never did, and this was one that my grandmother was already gone by this time, but my mother was really amazed by it. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, if you put it in the fridge, not only does the butter have a chance to harden back up again, so it's a more workable dough, but the water has a chance to redisperse. And now you're going to have a much better dough. All the flour will have a chance to soak up a little of that water. You won't have a chance to get, remember with gluten, we can't get real gluten development just with water. If you pour flour into water, all you get is paste. It's that movement, it's that agitation that gets gluten to really form. Because the glutenin and the gliadin have to be able to be pulled and stretched to get that process really started. So we haven't done that yet. Right? We haven't really given it any movement or any agitation to speak of. It's been very little. So even though the flour starts to soak up some of that liquid, it will remain rather static, just like in suspended animation for a while. Then, when we bring it back out, it should be all that much nicer. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what about mealy dough? I personally like making mealy dough for my bottom crust. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it flaky to start with. When I pull it out, I'm going to have this though with all these large, big flakes or big pieces of fat in there. If I want to make this into mealy dough, all I have to do is work it a little bit more.